In the desperate final stages of World War II, military strategists on all sides sought innovative, often experimental methods to gain tactical advantages. Operation Aphrodite stands as one of the more unusual and ultimately unsuccessful American initiatives of this period. Conceived in 1944, this classified program aimed to convert aging B-17 Flying Fortress bombers and consolidated PB-4Y bombers into radio-controlled flying bombs to destroy heavily fortified German military installations that conventional bombing had failed to neutralize. Despite the ingenuity behind the concept, Operation Aphrodite was plagued by technical limitations, operational difficulties, and tragic losses, including that of Lieutenant Joseph P. Kennedy Jr., the older brother of future President John F. Kennedy. Today we'll examine the historical context, technical aspects, notable missions, and the ultimate failure of this experimental program that represents both the innovative spirit and costly missteps of wartime weapons development. Hello, and welcome to Deadliest Disasters, where we cover some of the most devastating events that happened throughout history. Operation Aphrodite emerged in 1944 during a period when Allied forces were seeking solutions to destroy hardened German targets such as submarine pens, V-weapon launch facilities, and reinforced bunkers that had withstood conventional bombing campaigns. The concept was straightforward in theory, but complex in execution. Take aging bombers that had completed their service life, strip them of unnecessary equipment to reduce weight, pack them with explosives, typically 10 to 12 tons of Torpex, which is an explosive significantly more powerful than TNT, and convert them into radio-controlled flying bombs, essentially giant exploding drones. The program was developed under the direction of the United States Army Air Forces, or USAAF, with the official designation Operation Aphrodite for B-17 conversions, while the Navy's parallel program using PB-4Y Liberators was codenamed Project Anvil. The technical development was primarily handled by the Naval Research Laboratory and USAAF specialists who worked to create reliable remote control systems. These systems needed to allow a mother control aircraft to direct the exploding bomber after the crew had parachuted to safety. The conversion process was extensive. Engineers removed all non-essential equipment from the aircraft, including gun turrets, armor plating, and most internal structures not required for flight. 2 primitive television cameras were installed, one aimed through the windshield to assist with navigation, and another pointed at the instrument panel to allow remote monitoring of the aircraft's systems. Extensive modifications to the electrical and control systems enabled remote operation, while the payload area was fitted with racks of explosives wired to radio-controlled detonators. The operational procedure for an Aphrodite mission followed a carefully choreographed sequence. Each mission required 2 volunteer airmen, a pilot and flight engineer, to handle the takeoff and initial flight stages. A mothership, typically another bomber modified with radio control equipment, would accompany the drone aircraft. After takeoff, the pilot would climb to approximately 2,000 feet, level off the aircraft, and engage the radio control system. At this point, control would be transferred to the mothership, and the 2-man crew would arm the explosives before parachuting from the aircraft. The pilot would exit through the bomb bay, while the flight engineer would exit through the nose hatch. Once abandoned, the drone would be guided entirely by radio signals from the accompanying control aircraft. The mothership would direct the explosive-laden bomber toward its target using the television system to navigate. Upon reaching the target area, the controller would put the drone into a steep dive and detonate the explosives either by impact or by remote signal. This complex process faced numerous challenges. The primitive television technology of the era provided poor image quality, especially in adverse weather conditions. Radio interference could disrupt control signals, and mechanical failures were common in the aging aircraft. Furthermore, the requirement for pilots to arm the explosives before jumping out created significant dangers. Operation Aphrodite's primary goal was to target heavily fortified German installations that had proven resistant to conventional bombing. These included, number 1, V-weapon sites, as German V-1 flying bombs and V-2 rockets wreaked havoc on London and southern England. Destroying their launch and production facilities became a high priority. Number 2, submarine pens. German U-boat bases along the Atlantic coast featured reinforced concrete shelters up to 23 feet thick, which conventional bombs could not penetrate. Number 3, concrete fortifications. Various bunkers and hardened gun emplacements, particularly those along the Atlantic Wall, required specialized attacks. And number 4, ammunition dumps. Large-scale German ammunition storage facilities represented high-value targets that could potentially be destroyed by the massive explosive payloads of the Aphrodite and Anvil aircraft. These targets were strategically significant, but many were becoming less critical as Allied ground forces advanced across France following the D-Day landings in June 1944. This changing strategic context would ultimately contribute to the program's discontinuation. Between August 1944 and January 1945, approximately 14 Aphrodite missions were launched. The first operational mission occurred on August 4, 1944, targeting a V-weapon site in Pas-de-Calais, France. 4 modified B-17s were prepared, but only 2 successfully launched. One crashed into the English Channel, while the other veered off course and crashed near Gravelines, France, missing its target. Subsequent missions followed similar patterns of failure. On August 12, 1944, an Aphrodite B-17 crashed in Suffolk, England, causing extensive damage to nearby homes. Later that month, another mission against submarine pens at Helgoland Island resulted in the aircraft crashing 5 miles from the target. In each mission, technical difficulties plagued operations. Television guidance systems frequently failed. Radio control signals encountered interference, and aircraft experienced mechanical problems. Weather conditions often deteriorated visibility to the point where controllers could not accurately guide the drones. By January 1945, after multiple unsuccessful attempts, military leadership acknowledged the program's ineffectiveness. None of the missiles had successfully struck their primary targets, and the operational costs in terms of aircraft, equipment, and most significantly, human lives far outweighed any potential benefits. The most notable casualty of Operation Aphrodite was Lieutenant Joseph P. Kennedy Jr., who perished during a mission on August 12, 1944. Joe Kennedy Jr., the eldest son of Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., former U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom, was widely expected to pursue a political career after the war, carrying the aspirations of the influential Kennedy family. He most likely would have been the favorite in terms of presidential candidacy. Joe Kennedy Jr. volunteered for the dangerous Aphrodite missions after completing his required 25 combat missions with the Navy Patrol Squadron. He was assigned to a PB-4Y Liberator, Bureau number 32271, loaded with 21,000 pounds of Torpex for a mission against a V-3 cannon site in northern France. Accompanying Kennedy was Flight Engineer Lieutenant Wilford J. Willy. The mission, designated as Anvil Project Operation Doorknob 8, commenced from RAF Firstfield in Norfolk, England. After taking off, Kennedy and Willy were supposed to arm the explosives, establish radio control, and then parachute from the aircraft before it was guided to its target. Approximately 20 minutes into the flight, while still over Suffolk, England, and before the crew could bail out, the aircraft unexpectedly exploded with devastating force. The blast was so powerful that it completely disintegrated the aircraft, killing Kennedy and Willy instantly. Debris scattered over a wide area near the village of Blythburgh. The exact cause of the explosion remains somewhat uncertain, though the most accepted explanation involves a premature detonation of the Torpex explosives, possibly due to an electrical malfunction. Some reports indicate that static electricity may have triggered the detonation sequence prematurely. The loss of Kennedy had profound implications beyond the military sphere. Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. had been grooming his eldest son for political leadership, possibly even the presidency. Following Joseph Jr.'s death, these ambitions were eventually transferred to his younger brother, John F. Kennedy, who would go on to become the 35th President of the United States. In this sense, the tragedy of Operation Aphrodite indirectly altered the course of American political history. While Kennedy's death received the most attention due to his family's prominence, several other airmen lost their lives during Aphrodite operations. On September 11, 1944, Captain James Smith and First Lieutenant James Betchley were killed when their Aphrodite B-17 exploded shortly after takeoff. Similar incidents claimed other crews throughout the program's short history. The surviving airmen of the Aphrodite missions often reported harrowing experiences. The bailout procedure itself was extremely dangerous, requiring pilots to exit through restricted openings while wearing parachutes in an aircraft loaded with explosives. One pilot who successfully bailed out later recalled, quote, "Climbing out of the plane was the most frightening moment of my life. The knowledge that any unexpected vibration or electrical surge could trigger detonation while I was still aboard was almost paralyzing," unquote. Rescue operations for bailed-out crews were complicated by the fact that many jumps occurred over the English Channel or the North Sea. Air-sea rescue units maintained heightened alert during Aphrodite missions, but recovery was not always possible in adverse weather conditions or if radio communication failed. Several control aircraft crews also reported near misses when malfunctioning drones veered dangerously close to their aircraft or when explosions occurred at unexpected times. These incidents contributed to the growing skepticism about the program's viability among military leadership. Operation Aphrodite faced numerous technical challenges that ultimately proved insurmountable with 1940s technology. The radio control systems were rudimentary and subject to interference, signal degradation, and equipment malfunction. Controllers often lost partial or complete control of aircraft mid-mission. The television cameras provided poor image quality, particularly in cloudy conditions or at night. The video feeds were often described as grainy, flickering, or virtually useless by the operators. The extensive modifications to the aircraft, including weight redistribution due to explosive loading, created flight stability issues that made precise control difficult. Premature detonations were a dangerous liability. Several aircraft exploded before reaching their targets, likely due to electrical system failures or improper arming procedures. Weather constraints were also a major factor. Missions required relatively clear visibility for the television guidance to function effectively, severely limiting operational windows in the frequently overcast European theater. And even when all systems functioned correctly, accurately guiding the aircraft to hit specific hardened targets proved extremely difficult. Most missions missed their targets by significant margins. These technical limitations, combined with the inherent complexity of the operation, made success unlikely. The technology of the era simply wasn't advanced enough to reliably execute the concept, foreshadowing the guided missile systems that would become viable only years later. By January of 1945, military leadership conducted a comprehensive assessment of Operation Aphrodite and concluded that its continuation could not be justified. Several factors influenced this decision. First, the cost-benefit analysis was decidedly negative. The program had consumed valuable aircraft, specialized equipment, and most importantly, the lives of skilled airmen without achieving its objectives. Each mission required extensive preparation, multiple support aircraft, and specialized personnel, making it resource-intensive. Second, the strategic context had changed significantly since the program's inception. Many of the hardened targets that Aphrodite was designed to destroy were either captured by advancing Allied ground forces or had been successfully damaged by improved conventional bombing techniques, including the British Tallboy and Grand Slam earthquake bombs specifically designed for hardened targets. Third, compared to similar enemy programs, particularly the German V-1 flying bomb, Aphrodite was significantly less successful. While the V-1 was far from precise, it functioned as designed and delivered payloads to target areas with reasonable consistency. Aphrodite never achieved this basic level of operational success. Despite its failure, Operation Aphrodite represents an important step in the evolution of guided weapons technology. The program established several concepts that would later be refined in guided missile development, including remote control systems, television guidance, and standoff attack capabilities. The most significant lessons learned was that complex weapons systems require extensive testing and development before operational deployment. The rushed nature of the program, driven by wartime necessity, meant that many technical issues were never adequately resolved before missions were attempted. Ethically, Aphrodite raised questions about the acceptable level of risk for volunteer airmen and experimental programs. The high casualty rate, particularly in a program with questionable effectiveness, prompted later military policies to establish clearer risk assessment protocols for experimental weapons testing. However, decades later, precision-guided munitions would achieve what Aphrodite attempted, but with digital technology, advanced sensors, and sophisticated guidance systems that weren't available to wartime engineers. Operation Aphrodite stands as a compelling historical example of both wartime innovation and the limitations of pushing technology beyond its capabilities. The human cost was significant, most notably the loss of Joseph P. Kennedy Jr., whose death would have ripple effects through American political history. Other airmen who perished in the program represent the often overlooked sacrifices made in experimental military operations during wartime. Although the program was ultimately unsuccessful, its contribution to the conceptual development of guided weapons would eventually revolutionize warfare in subsequent decades. Operation Aphrodite was, in essence, an idea ahead of its time, a precursor to the precision-guided munitions that would become standard in later conflicts. In the final analysis, Operation Aphrodite serves as a sobering reminder that warfare often advances through trial and error, sometimes at disastrous cost. The failed program occupies a unique place in history, a bold experiment that, while unsuccessful, helped pave the way for future innovations that would transform the nature of aerial warfare. Thanks for watching today's video on this devastating but important historical event. If you found this informative, please hit that like button and subscribe for more historical deep dives, and let me know in the comments what other overlooked historical events you'd like to learn about. Until next time, this has been Deadliest Disasters.